Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And apologies for the slight delay. As Tom Arthur was saying, it's such a wonderful exhibition up the stairs that it's sad that you have to truncate your time. So anyway, so a warm welcome to all of you this morning. It's lovely to see you all. The breadth of the organisations, I think, within this room and from across the south of Scotland shows how important our town centres and communities are to us as we all go forward. I'm sure we'll particularly appreciate the comments that the Minister is going to make when he does so, and that myself and then Lee will talk a bit about the Town Centre Action Plan. Lee chaired it, and I sat on it representing the South. And we adopted a vision which Lee will explain in much more detail when we come to him, about what it is we want to do. And it's about making town centres part of the community. So while we grow town centres, we can't do it separate or not as part of the community. So it's very important that whatever we do in it, and especially in Gala now with Mike Gray from Energise Gala sitting in front of us, it's very important that we make sure that we do all the stuff that we need to do to make sure the community is brought into that. All of this as well is it has to be taken into the context of how COVID has affected towns as well as everything else, and how we start to get out and about. And I gather it's really good news now that on is it every second or third Sunday we now have a marketplace outside, and that really will help people to come and be part again of the community and use the town centre in a much broader way. It's also a great opportunity for our towns, and I mean towns and not perhaps cities, as people start to get out and they go to shop, they meet their friends in coffee shops, they maybe even get back to the pub again. And I think as part of all that, we come back to the very important part of community wealth building, which is now how we build our wealth in our communities from the community upwards. So very much relying on buying locally to make sure that we all use the services that we have locally, to make sure that we maximise to do that. And that's got a great relevance to the south of Scotland, where, as I keep saying, we're probably a unique part of Scotland, if not various parts of Europe, that we only have 4 communities in the south of Scotland with more than 10,000 population. We are a region of communities, of small communities. If you take places like Langham that have only got 2,500 population, we're going across our boards, going to Eyemouth, which has got even less. But they're all great communities in their own right, but they're very small, and therefore it's even more important that we keep those on. And all of our towns, Stranraer is trying to adjust now to reposition itself as not being a ferry port. Dumfries is flourishing, and the Minister and I are going to meet again in a few weeks' time in Mid-Steeple in Dumfries, as we look at how they're getting on there, developing the 8 or 9 buildings in the centre of Dumfries to become not just retail units, but become a place where people go back to live, where communities then, and I think there'll be something like 21 flats being created out what's going on there, and that'll bring back about 30 or 40 people into the middle of the town, which will help, which will help it grow. And that has to all be done working with the people that live there. So we can't be like a seagull, come in, drop, and go away again and leave people to get on with it. We have to keeping the local community involved in everything that we do. So we're going to hear from a number of speakers this morning. I'll introduce them. Lee Sparks, Professor Lee Sparks, Deputy Principal and Professor of Retail Studies at the University of Stirling. And Lee, as I said, chaired the Town Centre Action Group. Jane Morrison-Ross. And this is an interesting part. This is the first time since Jane joined that I formally introduced her as our Chief Executive. So my Chief Executive, Jane Morrison of South of Scotland Enterprise. Stephen Heddle is going to talk about, who's the causeless environmental and economic spokesman for local government, will speak. And then I've got a motley crew of a panel in the front row of Julia, John, and they're all friends of mine, so it's fine, I can say that. Norma will tease the life out of me about it later, I'm sure, but we'll talk about them when we get to it. So, without further ado, it's really my great pleasure to introduce you to Tom Arthur, MSP, the Minister for Public Finance, Planning and Community Wealth. Tom.
Thank you, Professor Griggs, for that welcome, and good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be back in Galashiels and to be able to meet all of you in person, some familiar faces and some people who I've met only previously online, virtually. It's much better to have the opportunity to actually meet in person, not least when we're talking around town centres and place and community. And as I said, this is my second visit to Galashiels in quick succession. In April, I enjoyed a walkabout with the local MSP and my good friend Christine Graham when we explored the transport hub and met with local businesses. And that was certainly an eye-opening experience for me, and to see the transformation that is taking place. And earlier this morning, I was delighted to meet with the director of the Great Tapestry of Scotland, representatives from Energised Galashiels, and some of the community participating in a range of transformational town and tapestry projects, where the whole ethos has been about strengthening place by thinking small. I was also pleased to announce the opening of the Looking Up at Architectural digital trail for Galashiels. And later this morning, I will be meeting with a local housing association to hear more about their actions to implement a community wealth building model. Before meeting with academics and students at the Heriot-Watt University Textile and Design campus to view their graduation show and place a stitch in a new tapestry panel that will be displayed at the transport interchange here in Galashiels. This new National Gallery and exhibition space has been purpose-built, of course, to house the Great Tapestry. The original proposal was developed collaboratively with input from Scottish Government Regeneration officials to help shape it from the outset. It received over £6.7 million in funding from the Scottish Government Regeneration Capital Grant Fund, the Borders Railway Blueprint Programme and Scottish Borders Council. The Great Tapestry is a great example of collaborative town centre action, bringing energy and vitality to Galashiels that many will be glad to learn from. All of this and more helps to show what can be done when people, communities, local and national governments and other organisations, public and private, work together to build on existing local assets, tell the story of a place, and capture and harness the imagination and pride that people have in relation to their town centres. In July 2020, Aileen Campbell, the former Cabinet Secretary for Communities and Local Government, commissioned a review of the 2013 Town Centre Action Plan to build upon the internationally lauded Town Centre First approach developed and adapted in Scotland. The review group, chaired by Professor Sparks, comprised representatives from across sectors and disciplines, including Professor Griggs from South of Scotland Enterprise. They were invited to collaboratively review the progress and scope of the Town Centre Action Plan 2013 and develop a vision for the future of towns, as well as the means to deliver that vision. Their report, A New Future for Scotland's Town Centres, outlined the policies, strategies and frameworks that have evolved in the years since the 2013 National Town Centre Review. It recognised the changing context and circumstances facing our town centres. The climate emergency, Brexit and the pandemic have separately and cumulatively accelerated and exacerbated the challenges faced by our town centres. The review provided an opportunity to rethink and re-energise our efforts to develop towns and town centres that meet the diverse social, environmental and economic needs and aspirations of our communities. The review group adopted a vision for towns that towns and town centres are for the well-being of people, planet and the economy. Towns are for everyone and everyone has a role to play in making their own town and town centre successful. This new vision has been welcomed by the Scottish Government and COSLA. We strongly support the overarching aim expressed in the review to work with our communities to transform the future of our town centres, help us recover and learn from the impact of the pandemic and realise the necessary economic, environmental and social wellbeing benefits. Towns and town centres are vital to the collaborative wellbeing of our society, economy and environment. They are part of the solution to the big challenges that face us. Additionally, they provide an important contribution to a wide range of national ambitions at a local level. Our response includes 59 actions which coalesce around the themes identified in the review and are designed to help deliver our shared ambitions on net zero, a wellbeing economy, improved public health and wellbeing, better planning, more opportunities for town centre living, enhanced digital capabilities for businesses and residents, and more. Together, they demonstrate our shared commitment with local government and our wider partners to supporting local communities and businesses through the challenging circumstances that we face. This collaborative town centre first approach will also help us deliver entrepreneurship ambitions set out in the National Strategy for Economic Transformation by creating enterprising communities. Scotland has been identified as fast becoming a global leader in community wealth building, and the Scottish Government will introduce community wealth building legislation during this term of the Scottish Parliament to support the transformation of our local economies. An important element of our commitment to the Town Centre First principle is the support for this through the draft National Planning Framework 4. NPF 4 offers a significant opportunity to focus on the recovery of towns and their centres through embracing collaborative working with stakeholders, in particular local communities, to maximise the future potential of these places. I am very, very pleased with the positive engagement which all sectors have offered during the consultation process of draft NPF 4. We're now working hard to consider all of the responses received so that we can make the right changes. We have also recently launched a consultation on potential changes to permitted development rights. The consultation contains a package of proposed measures to support Scotland's centres and seeks views on amending the use class orders, something which was specifically recommended by the review group. But towns, by their nature, are local. They can only contribute to our wider ambitions if they focus on the specific circumstances of their local communities and local partners. Our town centre first approach has been built on a strong partnership with COSLA and local government. We continue to build on that partnership and are working together to deliver the £325 million place-based investment programme to help create places across Scotland where we're able to live well locally and where we have vibrant town centres with the facilities, services and opportunities that we need to flourish. Crucial to the continued success of our towns will be an ability to remain agile and adaptable as new opportunities present themselves and new challenges emerge. Irrespective of the challenge, what will continue to be necessary for the success of our towns and communities will be collaboration and partnership across government and beyond. Success won't look the same in every town because the setting, history and context for towns and town centres isn't the same everywhere. The assets and opportunities which exist will vary. National and local government have a distinct role to play, which includes that of being an enabler. We can set the direction, provide encouragement, frameworks, examples of innovative practice, and back up our words with funding to develop the conditions for local solutions to take root. But we can't do this alone. Our towns and town centres are for us all. Our response to the review includes a national call of action, owned by all. So we will work in partnership to support and enable these outcomes to be delivered via the action plan. We will work with others to monitor and evaluate progress and support engagement to collaborate, explore best practice and learn from each other. I want to hear about the challenges and successes, to share understanding so that others are encouraged to develop local solutions that address the specific circumstances and context of their town. For our part, the Scottish Government reaffirmed its commitment to the Town Centre First principle for us and all Scottish public bodies in our published response and in Cabinet earlier this month. Our towns and town centres aren't defined by one person or one organisation, and their future success is dependent on more than a well-written report and its response. Our towns are the culmination of a broad range of activities, and their future success requires all of us in whatever role, to take positive action that improves outcomes for people and communities that live, work, and enjoy being there. Collaborative partnership working, which delivers upon a shared vision to improve outcomes for people, communities, and town centres, and resists doing that which may cause harm, is crucial to achieving the healthier, fairer, greener, successful towns our communities deserve. As I said, our response and the call for action sets out some of the ways in which we can all seek to do our part, locally and nationally, in reimagining, rebuilding, and re-energising our towns. It's up to all of us, and I encourage you all to play your part. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. That was really good, setting out the ambition. And it takes clusters of people in every community to want to do it. And I'd like personally to thank Christine Graham, who over the last 3 or 4 years has, in this, what we see outside, has really led a really combined group of locals and others to see everything that we want to do. And I think that's been really good and helped us. And Mike, I know we'll talk about more about that later, and about what we're doing within Gala, in this specific street. And it just needs good folk to come together to push it forward, which is what we need. It's my pleasure now to introduce Lee Sparks. Lee chaired the review group, and Lee is going to talk to us about the main objectives and actions from it.
Thank you, Russell. Good morning, everyone. It's always difficult following the Minister in that he's probably said much of what I want to say. So what you're going to get from me is probably going to reinforce some of those things, but also a reflection on some of the aspects and some of the things that I think are important within that. It's good to be back in Galashiels. I came to see the building just after it opened, and it's a wonderful example of a building and also the situation in place. And I'll make a shameless plug, if I may. The building there was done by Page Park Architects, and they've just completed a building within the University of Stirling that I was project managing, and they've won an award for this building, and they've won an award for the building at the University of Stirling as well. So if you're ever up in Stirling, come and have a look what they did in the centre of our campus, because that again does the same thing about situating a building in an existing place and transforming the space that we had at the heart of our university. So, Russell said, I'm Professor of Retail Studies, I'm Deputy Principal at the University of Stirling, I'm also Chair of Scotland Towns Partnership, and I chaired the review group. And I'm going to put my remarks into really 3 areas. I'm going to talk a bit about the background and how we got to the situation we're in at the minute. I'm going to say a little bit about what we'll refer to as Town Centre Action Plan 2, and then I'm going to conclude about some aspects of implementation. I'm not going to talk about the south of Scotland. I don't know as much as the panel will know, as anyone else knows, but I want them to build on the examples, use the examples to build on the themes that we've developed through what we've got. So it's the colour, the local colour element. So how did we get here? It's worthwhile reflecting that in 2009, 2010, the UK government commissioned a review into high streets in England. Their Portus review chose a retail expert to look at the retail high streets because they saw the issue in places as a retail issue, as a sector issue. And the Scottish government chose not to do that, not to follow that lead, but in 2012, 2013, did a national review of town centres. And that's really important. That distinction, which you might think is an academic playing semantics, is really quite important between a high street and a town centre, because it's about community. It's about that heart of it. And that review, chaired by another good architect, Malcolm Fraser, the National Review of Town Centres, led to the first Town Centre Action Plan. And from the Town Centre Action Plan, as the Minister said, town centre first, and some years after that, place principle. And then the place-based investment programme, a package of measures around improving our places around Scotland over a longer period of time. And if we think about other parts of the UK and elsewhere, they've looked at that, which has been a vision and a roadmap. And I've looked on it with some envy about how we've been able to do that within Scotland. If we look at what's happening in Wales or in Ireland, you're seeing very similar things. In England, they've stuck with this concept of the high streets, the high street task force. And again, I think the place part that we've got here is distinctive and different as a consequence. Towns are unique. Gala is different to other parts of the borders. I have a rugby background, so I'm told that frequently by people within the borders. All places are different. They have different assets, different backgrounds, different stories, and different parts of what we have in the borders. In the south of Scotland are very different to the central belt, where I live, or very different to where I was last week in Orkney. So we have to think about, when we look at towns, how we actually make the framework that is about what's distinctive about particular places. That's why it's embedded in the local element, the local community part of it. So over a decade or so, I think we've developed quite a roadmap, quite a way of doing things, and we've tried to move things forward. The context, though, has changed quite substantially. The climate emergency is one example of that, but we also do have to think about issues around Brexit, the way in which the government's pushed community as well, which has helped in many ways. And so big issues did remain a couple of years ago. And then, of course, we've had the pandemic, which has exacerbated and complicated so many things, but also has given us, I think, some accelerated behavior and some learning around those elements. And our towns are showing that mix of partly recovery, partly damage from what we've had, but also learning about that sense of place. And so the Cabinet Secretary in mid-2020 commissioned the review, and we produced the new Future for Scotland's Town Centres in February 2021. And what we argued were three main things, and these are picked up in TCAP 2. Whilst we've done a lot of good things, we needed to strengthen policy and understanding. We also need to reflect more substantially, and this is a tricky area, that we need to address the fiscal imbalances between our town centres and between other activities we do out of town in particular. And thirdly, we needed to focus on and build on the learning of a decade or so and actively support specific aspects and topics around town centre and town development. And those three areas of recommendations were encapsulated through the vision. And I will repeat the vision. The Minister said it, but I will repeat it. But I want to emphasise two things about it. Towns and town centres are for the well-being of people, planet, and the economy. Towns are for everyone, and everyone has a role to play in making their own town and town centre successful. Why am I saying repeat it? Because I think you need to think about well-being. Town centres are more than just a functional economic place. They're cultural, social, health, well-being, all sorts of aspects around that. And we need to harness that activity around it. It's about people and planet and the economy. It's not one over the other, it's all of those together. And that we all have a role to play in our local town centres and in some other places as well. One of the things we reflected on in the review is that we have spent half a century damaging our town centres by the ways we do things and the behaviours we have. And that if we've spent 50 years destroying them, we're probably going to need more than a short number of years to rebuild them. This is a longer term activity. The review had short term asks, and a lot of those were already being done, but it also had the medium term asks. And this isn't something that a review's done and we fixed it, now we'll implement it. There is a series of developments that will have to go on. There's a bit of a mountain to climb in some places, particularly when some of the things we might want to do are not within the purview of the Scottish Government, but are elsewhere. Since that publication in February 2021, there's been a series of meetings, roadshows, different groups coming together. Scotland's Towns Partnership has led a number of those. I stepped back from that to try and think, what are the barriers? How can we actually implement elements? What do we actually need to do in practice? And it's from that that Scottish Government and COSLA produced their joint response in April this year. It would have been quicker, but the sort of pandemic got in the way. Omicron didn't help. But we've now got that response. We've got TCAP 2. And as the Minister said, that's a call for action that we need to all think about. All levels, all places, doing their best for their town centres, for their towns, but within an enhanced enabling framework. And a framework that looks at a place socially, culturally, and economically. All of those together. I think you see that from what we have next door to us here. The framework that's in TCAP 2 is built around 4 categories, delivering then some specific outcomes. The Minister mentioned 59 outcomes. I don't intend to list them. You'll be happy to know. The categories that deliver the frameworks, the right policy framework, and how do we strengthen the policy side, the right kinds of support, what do places need and people within places need to actually deliver, a framework that actually structures the investment we need to make in our town centres, and then partnership working. It's easy to say partnership working, it's more than that. It's about aligning all of the activities that we do within government, through levels of government, through communities, all of those elements coming together. And those outcomes will hopefully lead us to strengthen planning, town centre first being re-enabled and emphasised. I'll come back to one aspect of that in a second, that we will start working on some of the taxation and fiscal levers. We want more people living in town centres and living around town centres, that they're digitally enabled, and that we have enterprising communities and vibrant local economies. And the local part of that is something that's really important. And the Minister's portfolio about community wealth building and the things that are going to come around that area emphasise that localness and that social enterprises, entrepreneurs, community roles and assets, cultural as well as social. And we'll obviously have to tackle aspects of towns, how they are helping us with climate change, but can do an awful lot more helping us with climate change. Some of those categories, some of those outcomes and actions are national. The National Planning Framework 4 is a good example of that, of setting a framework. But that doesn't matter if on the ground in local councils or local communities, the levers that National Planning Framework gives are not followed. So it's not just there's a framework and that's it. We need local authorities, councils, local enterprise agencies to actually implement those in the right ways, to implement the national frameworks, the national ambitions. And that's true of planning, it's true of transport, it's true of climate, it's true of housing. So we should see TCAP 2 as sitting within that broad framework. The national strategy was mentioned, Housing 2040 would be another one, the transport elements, we've got all of those come together. This is about seeing towns within the whole of Scotland and its economy and its society. All of those require engagement. Communities, social enterprises, entrepreneurs, residents, businesses at the local level. An illustration of that, some of you may have seen Scotland Loves Local and some of the aspects around that. If you think about it, that's a national framework, but we're delivering it through businesses, organisations on the ground in communities. I think that's a model that we need to think through a little more. Some of this requires new thinking, 20-minute neighbourhoods. And Russell and myself have had a number of conversations about whether 20-minute neighbourhoods work in a rural area or don't work in a rural area. It's the principles behind it we need to think about. Community wealth building would be another, and how we take that in a really meaningful way and lead on it in so many ways. Much of that requires vision, ambition, and change in behaviours. Behaviour change from business, from citizens, each of us, and organisational change in some of the organisations that we have around. It's a really interesting time. It should also be a radical time as well to rethink our towns. I think we all love our towns and places. I think we need to show that rather more in what we do and how we do it. And TCAP 2 is designed to help, enable, encourage that, but it needs local action to make it happen. And we'll hear some of that, I think, through the panel elements. I've not spoken about the south of Scotland. Others can say that rather better than I can. I will end with some words from TCAP 2, if I may. And it reiterates something that the Minister said. Words on a page or bullet points in a plan, or me standing here saying stuff, sets the scene. It does not deliver anything. doesn't deliver the outcomes we need on the ground, that's not one person's responsibility, one public body's responsibility, one minister's responsibility, or one organisation's responsibility. It's a shared endeavour, and it requires all of us, in whatever role we have, to take positive action about our towns. It also requires all of us, consumers, business owners, councillors, officials, ministers, politicians, whoever, to reflect on and avoid actions and decisions which continue to damage and harm our town centres. We've done a lot of things unthinkingly. Now understanding the damage we've done, we need not to do those same decisions just because we've done them in the past. We need to unwind that in so many ways. We need that energy and drive to do the good things and to stop doing the bad things. Hopefully, the framework from TCAP 2 allows us to do all of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. And can I say that both the Minister and Lee mentioned, as they were talking about there in both the words, is that communities are different. And as we've travelled across the south of Scotland for the last 3 years, talking to all the communities, they are. And I can say this now because I keep saying it and people agree with me, that one of the things we found out about all our communities is they're very pro the south of Scotland, but at local communities level, they all intrinsically hate each other in the nicest possible way. And that community competition, that energy that communities generate in doing that, is how all we gather together to understand what it is that we want to do in each community. Sadly, Stephen Heddle from COSLA can't be with us this morning, but he sent me a note to say that COSLA is still 100% support for TCAP 2. So it's with great delight that I introduce Jane Morrison-Ross, Chief Executive of South of Scotland Enterprise, who's going to talk to us about ambitions for our communities in this.
Good morning, and thank you, Russell. I do have several hard acts to follow now, which is always unfortunate, but I'm delighted to be here today in the Great Tapestry Discovery Centre. And I think, as has been said already, this is a fantastic example of what can be achieved, of a way of breathing life back into our town centres. With thanks to the Minister for his address and to both professors, I'm delighted to be here to talk a little bit about SOSE's ambitions for place planning and for our region's towns. I'd like to start by saying, and I suppose by reassuring you, that we are hugely ambitious for our towns, but we're not alone. It's not a sole ambition. This is a genuinely collaborative ambition and aspirations built on real partnerships across the south of Scotland. As the Development Agency for the South, we often explain our focus as being on the well-being of our economy, our communities, and our environment. It's back to that people, prosperity, and planet peace. This is a unique approach, particularly for a development agency, and it essentially does come down to having that real focus on and understanding of place. And that means we can't do that alone. That means working with our public and private sector partners, with individuals, communities, third sector experts and organisations, taking that whole system view and approach. We do not exist in isolation, either as organisations, as people, or as town centres. There is real strength in that collaborative method. The south of Scotland was the first place in Scotland, I do like to get this into every speech that I give, to launch our regional economic strategy. It demonstrates and captures that collaborative ambition, that shared vision for the south of Scotland. It's been developed not by us, or just us and our partners. It's been developed by the people, the communities, the businesses, the third sector organisations, the people that live, work, learn, raise families, and enjoy living in the south of Scotland. The Regional Economic Strategy, I'll just call it the RES from now on, because between that and TCAP, it's going to take too long. The vision for 2031 is to create vibrant, growing and connected places shaped by empowered communities. And I think for all of us here today, you've heard that message again and again. It's the empowered communities, the enabled communities, communities owning the direction of travel that's so important. In the Regional Economic Strategy, revitalising our towns is a core commitment, developed with and endorsed by all of those partners, all of those contributors that I've mentioned. So now, touch wood, I always have to say that when I say this next bit, as we begin to look ahead post-pandemic, post-COVID, we have an opportunity to look at how we deliver on those visions and ambitions, how we harness all of these different opportunities that are there, that the Professor mentioned, and align and coordinate these, both regionally, nationally within Scotland, and nationally across the United Kingdom, but then get ready to tell our stories beyond those borders too, because there are things that are happening in the south of Scotland that are leading the way, that are innovative, that are delivering in ways that aren't happening in other places yet. And it's really important that we share those stories and share that knowledge. So the launch of the revised TCAP 2 in April has demonstrated that real synergy between the Regional Economic Strategy, between our ambitions as South of Scotland enterprise, and the ambitions that we've heard across the south of Scotland. The Scottish Government's focus on place principle and place planning, which isn't easy to say, along with the new National Strategy for Economic Transformation, shows how we will get there. It gives us a delivery plan, a delivery path for achieving those goals. And it also captures how collectively ambitious we all are for the whole of Scotland, and for us particularly for the south. So both TCAP 2 and the Borderlands Inclusive Growth Deal are key parts of how we deliver that shared ambition for our region. The Borderlands Place Programme is a real opportunity for us collectively as well. It's an integral part of the Borderlands Inclusive Growth Deal, with £50 million committed across the 5 different local authority partners, and £20 million of that in Scotland. And obviously the Scottish Government has contributed a significant amount of funding to that deal as well. The priority for that place programme is to deliver change in local towns that will improve resilience, deliver practical positive outcomes for communities, for the people who live there. There are 5 key principles as part of that, and I want to share those just briefly because it's important to see how they align, how all of these different parts come together to create something that's greater than the individual parts alone. First is place-based. So it's looking at needs and solutions for each place on its own terms. And as Professor Sparks said, that's critically important for how we make this work. Understanding each place's ambitions for the next 20 years. What do we need? And also, what can we offer to the rest of the world? Collective, looking at the contribution of each part to the whole. So looking at the added value to the place, the area, the region, and the country and the economy. Systematic, again, bringing the public, private, third sector and community assets together as part of that single integrated system, supporting communities, services, and our economy. Critically, community-led, putting communities at the heart of decisions about those communities. I know it sounds simple, it's been said a lot this morning, but it is a real differentiator. Letting communities lead on the decisions and solutions that the Place programme will bring to the challenges facing their towns. Prevention and future-proofing. Investment and action directed towards preventing further deterioration in our towns and town centres, but also ensuring that they're equipped to respond and, for me, a really important part, take advantage of future change. So these principles will help create and sustain vibrant towns and town centres, ensuring communities see the direct benefits of inclusive growth and making the most of our cultural and heritage assets for communities and visitors, like the Great Tapestry, where we are today. Place plans are the first stage in delivering that transformational change at a local level. Development of the project, services, effective implementation, monitoring and evaluation of the impacts, it will be what helps us deliver and measure that change. But we know that transformational change takes time, as the professor said, and making a real difference will take time. So multi-year interventions to support enabling and development activity, to develop real progress on the ground, are absolutely critical. We want to work collaboratively to set those objectives, to deliver real value for people, both now, but also for the generations yet to come. The Scottish Government commitment to multi-year aligned funding in TCAP2 is particularly welcome, as is the Scottish Government's contribution, as I mentioned, to the Borderlands Inclusive Growth Deal. With this level of support, place planning will spread out beyond the borderlands. Priority places identified by our local authority colleagues, and indeed, this is already happening. We're already starting to hear this reflected back to us. But all of these things give us a great opportunity to develop an exemplary place planning kit, tailored to our region's communities, to the needs and challenges, but learning from practical experience as place plans grow and develop and deliver. Our ambition is for our towns to flourish, responding to their own needs and challenges and developing those solutions in ways that best suit the need of the places, through that genuine partnership working across sectors and agencies. It's part of our role as the development agency to listen as well, and that's why our chair set out on the first South of Scotland Enterprise Roadshow quite a while ago now. And that's why we set out again at the end of last year on the second tour, where we went from Stranraer to Eyemouth and back again, trying to visit as many communities, as many town centres as we could, not to talk about SOCI, although we did do a little bit of that, but actually to actively listen to the challenges, the opportunities, the ideas of the people of the south of Scotland. And that's hugely important to us, and it's really going to drive our action plan, but also the interventions that we work with collaboratively as well. So working around COVID restrictions and in between COVID restrictions, we visited 24 different locations in 2 phases. We had some breakfast sessions and we had some online sessions to support that as well. We heard key messages. We heard that SOCI should be facilitating collaboration. We have partners here in the room today that I hope will support the fact that we are doing that and trying to do it. We heard that we should be supporting communities. We now have a dedicated, even stronger, very expert communities team within SOCI. We have community wealth building now within SOCI, and I know some of my colleagues are in the room today. We heard that we need to support unlocking key economic opportunities. We also heard shared concerns right across the south of Scotland, Dumfries and Galloway, and the Scottish borders around housing and transport infrastructure, key components in revitalising our communities and our town centres. And we're working with partners now, including our local councils and Transport Scotland, to address those challenges and issues now. We're also working with some of our partners, the registered social landlords and others, to look at how we can support unlocking the housing challenge too. So we see place plans as a vital tool to drive a broad range of policy areas, including economic growth, community wealth building, health and well-being, climate change, transport, digital, skills and learning, and critically social inclusion. And across this broad range of policy areas, SOCI's role will be to work in collaboration with the local authorities, with anchor community organisations, with our third sector partners and other community groups, building capacity and adding value through our region-wide reach and breadth and depth of knowledge. Our town centres are at the heart of our local areas. Our villages and rural communities are connected to those towns, and value flows both ways. Our communities need vibrant towns to be part of their environment. We need to enable, empower, and support the reinvention of our town centres, but more than that, we need to work together to make this happen and to deliver on that, to create that fair, green, and flourishing south of Scotland. Our towns face challenges, but they are resilient too. We've seen that all through the last couple of years, that determination to keep moving forward, not to succumb to the challenges of the pandemic. We also think our region benefits from a strong sense of community and a great strength and depth of community-led activity as well, from festivals and common ridings to innovative economic development projects and practically anything else you can think of in between. We must not forget that we have a lot going for us, and there is a great foundation to build on. There's also, I think, a collective recognition that we need to work together. We are stronger when we work together. That between us, we can bring resources and expertise and problem solving to bear on any problem or challenge that we can't do alone. And there is a real prize at the end of all of this for us. That prize is vibrant, successful, attractive towns that people want to live and work in. Townsfolk want to move to from other parts of Scotland, other parts of the UK and beyond. Towns which are economic powerhouses across the south, which grow and support their communities in an inclusive, sustainable way. I think that's a hugely exciting prospect. And SOCI's very much up for working with all of you on that challenge. Most of all, we look forward to being part of the collaborative partnership that will make this happen. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I say thank you? The minister's now gone off. We talked about how important housing is to us, so the minister's now going off to look at some housing. So Tom, thank you. And I'll see you shortly somewhere else. Thank you. So I'm now going to ask my motley crew, my panellists, to please take their seats. Are you going to? Oh, you're going to lose, right? All right. Well, others can. I know you're off, Jane. Christine, I know. So, John, other three, could you take up your speed? She'll be back in 2 minutes. And who's going first? Who's first?
Norm, I think, first.
Oh, well, Julia's going to go first. Go on, sit down. Go on, seat yourselves down up there, please. Please. So, let me formally introduce my expert panel for today. I'm delighted to see them all. Norma Austin-Hart, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Third Sector Interface in Dumfries, is just gone powder her nose, and we'll be back shortly. Julia Malloy, who Chief Executive of Scottish Borders Housing Association. John Fordyce, co-founder of the Borders Distillery. And last but by no means least is Michael Gray, Chair of Enterprise Galashiels Trust. Now, they're all going to talk to you for a very short period of time, he said, looking at them all knowingly, about the issues around all the stuff we've talked about in the morning in the technical term. So Julia is going to go first. So Julia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Russell, and good morning, everyone. I think I'm going to focus on housing, and when we look at the COVID experience, we know that this has been a really tough time for our communities. My team have spent the last 2 years talking to people who felt locked up, isolated, worried, and the importance of green space, the importance of a balanced life, the worry in the current economy as we come out of it, have all come out really strongly in our discussions. And it's really essential that when we're looking at how we rejuvenate and revive our town centres, that we build that into design and spaces that work not just for living, but for leisure and for visiting as well. So it's great today to hear such a strong message over the holistic view of how we approach town centre regeneration. I think at the centre of that is who owns what, and it's one of the big challenges where you've got market failure. We need partners that invest in our town centres who are here for the long haul, whatever the sector they're from, be that from the housing sector, social enterprises, private businesses and the public sector. And I think we struggle, and some of our high streets struggle, because that investment is not for the long haul, and empty spaces and absent landlords are a real challenge. So it's really important that as we move forward with plans that we unlock the mixed tenure and complex ownership issues. And we also need to remember the people who live in town centres now. We often talk about revitalising buildings. You know, I look across the street and I can see plants in windows and whatever. Clearly, our town centres are places where people are living, but where markets are failing, often those homes can be in a really challenging condition. They're often in the private rented sector and they need investment as well. So it's important that those people are engaged in that change as well. And I think the recent SOCI message that Jane mentioned was for more homes. It's not about turning the whole of town centres into homes, but it is about saying housing plays a vital part in that. We work across the south of Scotland. There are 7 main RSLs. We're a significant base. We've got over 20,000 homes between us. We're providers for housing need, obviously. We're economic regenerators. We're social enterprises. We can facilitate community wealth building, and we can work with communities and partners to harness views on change. Our mindset has always been more than bricks and mortar and rent collection, and our door is open and we'll play our part in delivering strategically and locally. The most important thing is getting shelf ready. And I think when we look at Energise Galashiels, we look at the mid-steeple quarter in Dumfries, we see shelf-ready projects emerging. We see that in other towns as well. And that master planning work is essential. And I think as a region, our journey to self-ready is growing, but we need to strengthen it. We are different. I think Jane said the rurality, it's different here. The 20-minute neighbourhood debate in rural areas lives on, but livable places is what it's all about. And why we live here and what we value from where we live, be it in the towns or the villages, is what drives our lives. And we need to make our places a place for everyone. So affordable homes needs to be at the centre of that. The regional economic strategy provides a great framework to move us forward. And I've been part of the development of that as a member of the partnership. And we've engaged with a whole range of stakeholders and communities. And we do that at a regional level, and we see that at community levels as well. I think absolutely central to the success of whatever we do is great leadership. And we need to be clear who's driving the change. Everyone won't be in charge, but a strong framework that aligns us to common outcomes is what will move us forward. So housing is here to play its role, as are other partners, and we look forward to being part of that future and working with partners to deliver it. Thank you.
I think we keep coming up with housing, but housing is really, really critical to us all. We need places to live. We need places for our young people to live. That means they'll stay in the south of Scotland. We need places to attract people in to come and live. So housing is very important. Norma, I'm going to thank Norma Austin Hart now to say her few words, and I will pass on to you, Norma.
Thank you, Russell. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name's Norma Austin Hart, and I'm Chief Executive of an organisation called Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway, which is one of Scotland's 32 third sector interfaces. It's been gratifying this morning to hear so many positive words about community-led regeneration and the importance of and the role of communities within that. And an awful lot of good stuff's been said that I had already planned to say, so there's no point in me repeating all of that. So I think what I would like to emphasize, be slightly provocative actually, is to challenge this audience and even beyond this room, the notion of partnership. And what do we really mean by partnership? I was gratified to hear Jane's specific references to the roles of the public, private and third sectors. And it's true, we need all three working together to regenerate our town centres. But I would say that, of course, the challenge of working with the third sector is the most complex and the most difficult. I don't have the answer written down here to tell you what it is. But I do know that the situation is improving. The role of the third sector is more visible. It is better recognised. Certainly, I would say for Dumfries and Galloway, but I expect it's the same in the Scottish borders as well. And exemplars like the stove and the mid-steeple quarter has already been mentioned several times, and all my notes about that have already been covered. But it is such a good example of community-led regeneration, and it's worth pointing out it took 4 years of consultation and discussion and working with, and in fact, the public and private sectors keeping out of the way, being blunt, to allow those 4 years of meaningful, deep consultation with the local communities in Dumfries to come up with that action plan. Sorry, I shouldn't put my glasses on. The development plan. It's a 10-year development plan that they now have. They have acquired, Mid-Steeple Quarter has 5 properties. It owns 5 properties in Dumfries High Street. It has a £7 million project going on to redevelop the baker's oven. So yes, there's a lot happening. I know that if Matt Baker were here, he'd be sitting at the back of the room saying, remember to say something about the importance of revenue. Capital, thanks to Borderlands, that's going to make a huge difference. But we need revenue as well. And it's important we don't forget that. So just lastly, the art of partnership. It's not easy. I sit in a lot of partnerships and I hear a lot of words about a commitment to partnership working, particularly with the third sector. I would like to see more outputs and outcomes. So that's what I mean about being a little bit challenging, provocative to this audience. How do you do that? Well, if you're in a statutory agency, the first thing you do is stand back. The expertise is there, the skills are there in the community to come forward, to express what the wishes are. It needs facilitation, yes, but I think the importance of the development not being top down, not being led by the statutory agencies cannot be overstated. So work with community groups, include them, reference them, acknowledge them, but most importantly, respect them. Parity of esteem. And I think on that basis, I very much liked your words, Lee, about the importance of what we do going forward, not adding to the damage that's already been done. And I think good partnership working with the third sector would avoid increasing the damage and move us towards those good things that we've heard so much about this morning. Thank you.
I think we all have to remember that whatever we do in our communities and our town centres, they're likely to be led by community, social and third sector organisations at the beginning until they grow, and therefore as they come together to do all that, without those third and social enterprises, this will not happen. So we need them on the ground. John, I'm going to introduce John Fordyce, who's going to talk to us. I know he's going to talk to us about, I know what I'm telling you. Go on.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to apologise for those who know me, because they know exactly what I'm about to say, and I repeat it time and time again. The issue I think we face around housing, TCAP, and all the other policies is that we're not addressing dereliction as an issue. There is a stark contrast between climate change policy and housing policy. In fact, they're in total opposition to each other. We have 44,500 derelict properties in Scotland between retail, housing and industrial, and we aren't taking any meaningful government action on addressing this problem. I'm interested in dereliction because, having spent 3 decades running around the world working for Scottish companies, I've understood the psychological impact of dereliction on communities. I've understood that it's usually a supply side problem. I've understood that if you want to move people into a skilled job environment without going through university, you have to provide local skills training, and derelict housing provides a massive range of local skills training. And I've understood that we're not going to get kids back into housing at an early age unless we offer 50-year mortgages, restore houses back in town centres where they can live without cars, where they can use their bicycles and they can meet other people their own age. So it seems to me that unless we address this, all the rest of it is not going to get addressed. I think in Scotland we're in a very interesting position. We have the financial institutions at the state level which can bring forward innovative financial solutions. We have a long history in Scotland, going back to Victorian times, of using bonds to raise funds which produce revenue. And we have the policy environment to deal with this. The only plea I would make before I sit down and stop boring you is that the VAT exemption, which is extended to the beige box brigade, should be extended to people that want to be in towns restoring derelict properties. It is a complete nonsense for our government to be saying that building houses based on the car economy with 1.5 spaces per house, miles away from the 20-minute agenda, is a good idea when charging people an extra 20% to fix up the 500 flats that sit in the south of Scotland unusable, with no EPA rating at all. And until we address that, I don't think we're going to make much progress. Thank you.
John's cause is a very sensible one, and I know and it is, because what it says to us is, yes, across the south of Scotland, if you look at the number of new houses that have been built in some of our communities over the last, goodness me, I think I was down in Langham a few weeks ago and they were telling me since 1990, I think it's 8 new houses have been built in Langham. But they've got a lot of empty old houses. So why aren't we trying to do them as much as that? So it's about looking at what we have as assets, as an eclectic mix, and trying to do that. So there's a lot of common sense behind what John says about trying to bring our own things back into it, and allowing our young people to go and take them over and develop them in their own way and funding them to do that. I've kept Mike to last because Mike is our local, and therefore Mike should end our little morning together. Mike's chairman of Regeneration Trust. Now, I've known Mike for longer than both of us would dare to remember, but Mike's a really great example about how a community has got together and taken the challenges that it sees and move it together. So, Mike.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Russell. It was in early 2014, and I was in New Zealand visiting our younger son and his family, and a colleague emailed me and asked me what I thought about the state of the town. And when I got home and I walked around the town centre, which I usually do on a Saturday morning to get my rolls at Dalgetty's, I was shocked at what I'd failed to see, with so many vacant shops and a forest of for sale signs. So a group of like-minded volunteers formed Energise Galashiels Trust. We wanted to make a difference, and to your point, Lee, we wanted to deliver action. In the early days, we had highs and lows. We had highs with a countdown clock to welcome the opening of the Borders Railway, and a mural of the Flying Scotsman's visit to Galashiels. And we designed and erected pole banners, and some recent designs you can see just outside here of the tapestry. But lows in 2018, when a bids initiative failed. One ballot paper worth £1.8 million of rateable value votes from a major supermarket supportive of bids was not received. However, this failure resulted in a new partnership with Scottish Borders Council and the then South of Scotland Economic Partnership for a pilot regeneration programme which we called Build a Better Gala 1. Scotland's Town Partnership supported us with the Love Local campaign, and our 12 Days of Christmas video was viewed by an estimated 100,000 people online. And support from Scotland's Local Government and Communities Directorate for a series of town and tapestry projects, and the Minister has just met with some of the volunteers involved with that. That BBG1 pilot led to the development of the Vibrant Gala Plan, a 3-year plan supported by South of Scotland Enterprise and Scottish Borders Council. Not just supported by SOCI and SBC, but they're part of an integral team. Team's a wee word, but an essential ingredient in making an impact. And Energise Galashiels is fortunate in having an outstanding team of volunteers. But it's also great this morning that I can thank Julie Hogg from SOCI and Graham Johnson from Scottish Borders Council for their strong support of Energise Galashiels Trust. And they both know perfectly well that there are times when I curse them. And I'm sure they may curse me. Then we had the wonderful boost of this great Tapestry of Scotland Visitor Centre opening last year. And Energise Galashiels had lobbied for years to bring this £7 million investment into Galashiels Town Centre, frequently quoting the Town Centre First principle. A game changer for the town, with hugely positive feedback from visitors, a catalyst for change. We've just completed Build a Better Gala 2 at the end of March. And examples of what we've done are our Facades project, which saw Energise working with the owners of vacant properties to brighten up their frontages. And if you stroll down Channel Street, you'll see some examples of that. We had a property improvement scheme, including small-scale frontage upgrades, but in key locations. One being extra gorgeous, just opposite this centre's entrance. We invested in murals, again, there's one just behind you, and also at the Douglas Bridge Gateway from the rail and bus interchange. Continued to develop our digital gala projects and the Galashiels Heartland of the Borders online platforms. We supported events such as the recently launched Heartlands Market, which is certainly contributing to a vibrant Galashiels. And a key project, we commissioned the Tapestry Way studies to inform future town centre strategy. And this included market research as to what types of future occupancy may be possible in the town centre. We developed concept designs for 3 key cluster vacant properties, looking at what transformation and repurposing options may be possible. We looked at new public realm investment and at existing assets which could be enhanced, such as Bank Street Gardens and Cornmill Square Fountain, whilst not ignoring the small blights in our town centre. Simple ideas to hide away permanently parked wheelie bins. We don't like permanently parked wheelie bins. We were delighted with the input from our community consultations, which included an online survey with over 500 respondents, a drop-in day here in this Discovery Centre, a Galashiels Academy online session, and a community feedback event. So Energise Galashiels is now starting to deliver the first of the Tapestry Way Study Action Plan projects as part of Build a Better Gala 3. And that's Energise Galashiels Trust.
I wanted to end with, Mike, is it was great as we come to the end of all the conversations this morning to do exactly what Lee and what the Minister said is, see it's now in action. So things are happening. I can remember, goodness me, 3 or 4 years ago, sitting with Mike and Christine Graham as we thought about what we did. And I have to tell you, Channel Street back then was not a sight to behold. And it's a much better sight to behold, not perfect. But what some of the challenges that Mike and his team have gone through, I think, are challenges that we'll meet all over the south of Scotland. First big challenge in a street like this is finding out who owns the properties, because that is not an easy task. And I know from my friends at Mid Steeple, I think it took them 4 or 5 years in some cases to find who the real owners were. Once you find them, you can then go and have a sensible conversation with them. But it is, you have to track them back. A lot of them are big pension funds. Some of them will be individuals, and you really have to get down. And I know Mike's engaged now with the key owners within Channel Street to take that forward. So we now have an expert group. We've still got Lee, and we've still got Jane. So questions, comments, anything you would like to raise that hasn't been raised, moans, groans, and anything else you would like to say? Yes, sir.
Yeah, it was very welcome to hear all that was said about community health and regeneration and so on. There's 2 concepts which were not mentioned, and they are essential for the development of our towns. One is local democracy, which we don't have. It's the only country in the world that does not have local democracy. Municipal governance. And the second thing is subsidiarity. Subsidiarity. Taking decisions at the appropriate place, that is in towns. Yeah, and what you're talking about now. It's pity the minister's not here any longer. To invite the government and anyone else, why don't you reconstitute local democracy in Scotland? You can go 20, 30 miles from here and find it in another country, that is England. Not great there, but a lot better than we have.
Thankfully, democracy is what we have, and it's what. And while I lived in America for a while, so I understand what local democracy looks like in the States, which is different to it is here. On the last point you made, though, I think part of the whole thing, and maybe I'll ask Lee to comment just briefly on TCAP 2, is about local democracy. Is about letting each community build it up from the base. So while there will be some overarching stuff, that the government does, that the heart of any community is right here. And I think Mike's demonstrated through Gala how that has been built by the local community. It's the same in Dumfries. So that is very much building around that. Lee, would you like to say anything further on that or not?
I think you summarised it, Russell. To be honest, I think it's a national thing at the local level. I think the point about the level of the range of it, I think that's always an interesting question for any government. But I do feel that from TCAP 2 and the things we're trying to do and the examples we've had here, that's the vital part. I'd like to think it'll be interesting to see what does come through with the community wealth building bill, and how that does actually sort of add to that dimension as well.
I think, if I may sort of not move the answer a little bit and suggest something else. One of the challenges that we have as an enterprise agencies, and I know Norma has and other people do as you go around, is finding out what the true voice of a community is. And that's very important to us as an enterprise agency as it is to the council. And I think one of the things we can encourage locally is for all the community and organisations, of which there are many in the south of Scotland, and indeed in every community, how they come together to grow what is a single voice without giving up any of the ownership of what they are looking for a community. And that then makes it much easier for the council and ourselves and a whole host of other people to do that. And that is not always easy to happen. Not always easy to find in communities that can have some very diverse voices. Okay, thanks, sir. Other points or questions? Goodness me. Well, if that's the case, yes, Steve.
Steve Rogers from Dumfries and Galloway. I was really interested in John's contribution, and I think we see it right across a lot of our town centres in the south, the evidence of essentially perpetual underinvestment, particularly in buildings and building stock. And I just wondered whether the panel had any views on how that might be tackled. I mean, what you're saying, John, is that some of those levers sit elsewhere in terms of either UK government or Scottish government. But I'm interested also in the type of local action that we might be able to take to address some of that underinvestment by supporting and encouraging and incentivising investment in our town centres. And I agree, I don't think currently we've quite got that right, and particularly at the national level in terms of some of those tensions between the way in which we fund new housing, for example, by RSLs, and the way in which we're also in the same, by the same token, trying to encourage investment in. So in Dumfries and Galloway, one of the steps we took was to set up a town centre living fund, which we use to support investment by RSLs and other housing providers who are experiencing essentially a viability gap that is preventing them in either reusing existing buildings or indeed developing existing vacant sites in town centres. But I don't think, until we address that issue, I don't think we're going to tackle or come up with solutions to that endemic problem of buildings, properties and sites that can cause such a community divide in a lot of our towns.
This is John, on you go, and then I'll ask you to comment. No, on you.
First of all, we have the supply chain, so making top down really attract young people to use these properties and do them up. And I think the second thing you can do, which we ignore, so I talk to climate agencies, give every derelict building a carbon back. Got enormous carbon, embedded carbon in these 44,000 properties. We don't. I mean, I built a distillery of derelict falling down dry rock, embedding carbon in there, but I can make it for 20 years. So we do the supply side, get rid of the disincentives, and that's all based on lobby groups, all lobbying. We incentivize through pricing, and if you're a young person, you get a SNIB 50-year mortgage, which half is regeneration, as long as you don't spend outside 25 miles, you get a massive great carbon credit, which is priced at the market at the time, reduces your mortgage, saves does climate change. Russell is bored, stupefied. You're on about years. Until we get this radical change of thinking at government level on the supply side, you won't see the demand side improve. And until you see the demand side improve, we got away with it because we're an export company. We pay all our back, get it back. Because we don't sell in the UK, we sell overseas. That's how we got around it. But if we hadn't had the VAT, if we hadn't had that VAT flexibility, we wouldn't have built it. I promise you, 20% extra is too much.
I think what John is saying, and he knows I don't get bored about it at all, I could talk about it till all day, but it's tough. But that doesn't mean just because it's tough we shouldn't do it. And there are things we could do if we just took them on, looked at how we could change some of the things we do. And I think that's going forward, and bless him, Tom Arthur's going up back to Parliament this afternoon to listen to Kate Forbes talk about what the next 5 years is going to be like in public finance. If we don't start looking at some of those difficult things that we're going to do to release capital in different ways, then we're not going to do anything over the next 5 years because we'll be very fiscally restrained in terms of that. Lee, you wanted to say something around that as well.
Yeah, John partly covered it. I was going to ask him how we actually bring that in, so you mentioned that. I was going to make the point that in our review we did say that you had to change the fiscal years, the VAT was one of those examples. My question really was, you talk about removing the disincentives. Does that go far? Actually, should we be reversing where the incentives are?
I can't, I'm not an expert like these guys, but I have a very young workforce, okay? They haven't changed to 23, okay? And they're all mad to get into the housing market. And they all want to do a project. And they don't want to have to go out to some faceless estate miles away where they can't see their mum, okay? And we have in Hoyt 500 bloody derelict properties that aren't EPA rated. Now, all I'm saying is get rid of the incentive, disincentive. They'll do what they need to do, don't worry. They're smart young people. They'll do what they need to do.
Colin McGrath, which was Community Council Network. We cover all this community councils. There's one for a colleague here. Their passport is college. Oh, it's a huge place. Nothing's been done. It's rocks away across. 2 weeks. What they got you. Now, Community Empowerment Act, which is my particular speciality, you have asset transfers. The community in Jedburgh Bank are getting the town hall transferred them. Because we're looking at the moment, the 3 major. There are lots of others in the same position. We've got to do a problem. We've got to support them. Whether it's people, whether it's buildings, identify their site value, their people potential value, whatever it may be. You may not going to go out. So I'm interested in your comments there.
The answer is no. In 2 parts, the answer. One, Yield Housing have relatively recently acquired it and have development plans in it. So it's, you interestingly, you refer to it as Borders College, whereas for me it was Galashiels Academy, because that's where I went to school a long time ago. I know how long it's been empty, and indeed I live about 600 metres along the road from it, so I know perfectly well what it is. So number one, I think we certainly viewed it positive that Yield Housing is got plans to develop it, and that's great. But also from an Energised Galashiels point of view, one of the things that we were really keen to do, I want to emphasise the deliver action part. And I believe we've absolutely got to stay pretty focused. We're a volunteer group, limited capacity. You've got to stay focused. So our focus was on what we can now call informally Tapestry Way, the old town centre. And John Curry spoke to me one time and said, could you guys not have a look at this over there? And I said, no, because we don't have the capacity. We need to stay focused, and can we deliver actions there? So it's kind of 2 parts. Number one, I think something is happening to the Galashiels Academy Borders College site. And number 2, Energise is trying to stay focused to ensure that we deliver action in a reasonable time frame. I mean, to me, delivering action for our community is what's happened this year. What are we doing this year? I understand strategy. I'm in favour of strategy. But bottom line is you've got to be delivering its performance this year and next year, not 5 and 10 years down. Where's the strategy? Where's the delivery?
And it's the community that can do it, and people. People are not paid or volunteers, they can certainly do it. And there's got to be a time when both of those are paid, and there's culture change, major change. Those who volunteer in some days can get involved directly with local authorities and others. It's on par, not just sure on par, maybe take charge, because they've got many quality background qualifications.
So,
I was just going to say, in our relationship, which I mentioned in my short talk, I think we've got a great relationship with Scottish Borders Council and Susie. So I think we're definitely on an equal footing. There are occasions where some think that they're going to try and tell me what to do, and sometimes I think I'm going to tell them what to do, and we need to find a way around that.
Okay, so one last
And yes, sir.
just to say, I think this gentleman mentioned Chamber Town Hall earlier. I'm George Bart, chair of the Chamber Legacy Group, and we're in the process of taking over all the public assets and services in the town into the community. Soci has been, I have to say, Soci has been very helpful. The Scottish Borders Council have been okay. Bureaucracy, I have to
that happy note, hopefully. I will draw us all together this morning. Can I say a big thanks to Professor Lee Sparks, who not just turned up this morning, but did a grand job, I have to tell you, and for all the months he chaired TCAP 2, which was a very eclectic mix of people with quite different views on certain subjects, I will say. Love to thank my Chief Executive, Jane Morrison-Ross, and our distinguished panel of John Fordyce, Ellen Mawson-Hart, Mike Gray, and Julie Malloy. And thank you all for coming this morning, and have a safe journey home to wherever you're going. Thank you.